Oh, folks, we got a full 25 minutes with our man, Trevor Sikma from PFF.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we're here, everybody, on a Wednesday. Locked On Lions, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt Derry with you. Let's talk some draft. Trevor Sikma, Locked On alum, and now a prestigious draft analyst at Pro Football Focus at PFF, joining us today. Of course, Locked On Lions. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate all the everydayers that are out there. And, of course, subscribe and check us out on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Lions picking 28th in round 1. 60 overall in round 2. Trevor is all over it and joins us, like I said, today. Trev, great to see you.
Matt, always good to be with you, my friend. Exciting time of year, so I'm excited to talk some draft here with you.
So, first and foremost, what's standing out right now? We're about a week and 1 day away. We're about a week away. What's standing out? What's hot right now that you're kind of putting your finger on for this draft?
I mean, as it always is, it feels like it's the quarterback position, right? And I think that this year we actually have a lot to talk about in a different manner, right? Last year we had these 6 quarterbacks and we were wondering, okay, 4 go in the first round, 5 go in the first round. We ended up getting 6 in the top 12. And for this year's draft, the question is it going to be like it was in 2022? Because I think that Cam Ward's going to go number 1 overall. And then your guess might be as good as mine, right? I'm not so sure. The next quarterback off the board, we feel like it's going to be Shedeur Sanders, but is that at 3 to the New York Giants, 9 to the New Orleans Saints, 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Who knows where he may end up coming off the board? And I think when you look at the 2022 NFL draft, Kenny Pickett goes in the first round, and then we don't get another quarterback drafted until Desmond Ridder about midway through the 3rd round. And so is this going to be a similar situation? Because I think the longer this draft process goes, certainly this week, you ask what's hot. We're hearing, Jalen Milro, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, like all of these names could be potential first-round quarterbacks. And obviously for the Lions, with a quarterback already, they hope that as many quarterbacks go in the first round as possible. But I think that's the big question, right? Is how many of these guys are we going to get in round 1 or in the top 50? I still feel like we're going to get 2 quarterbacks in the first round, and that's it. But we'll see what happens on opening night, like you said, a week away.
I want to get to some quarterback stuff later on and keep going with this, but let's get to the Lions for a sec. Sitting at 28 is a good thing. That means they had a good season last year. You've been bullish anytime we've had you on about what Brad Holmes has been able to do in the draft. He's traded up. He loves to seemingly trade up for Alabama players. That could happen again with Booker. We'll see. But how do you view Brad's paintbrush here for next Thursday?
Yeah, I think that the Lions are in a good spot, specifically when you look at some of their biggest needs. Like you said, maybe it's along the interior offensive line, depending on how they feel about, long-term with Graham Glasnow and Frank Ragnow. And I was I think I might've been on this show a year ago when I was like, hey, I think Frank's awesome. Ragnow's an awesome player, but he's been beat up before. Is he close to retirement? And then he kind of came out and he said, no, like I'm feeling good. I'm good to go at least for a couple more years. And so it just depending on the long-term outlook there, obviously you're losing Kevin Zeitler, but you're replacing him with Christian Mahogany, who you drafted. And I think that was a really good long-term outlook for them. I think he fills their personality of their offensive line really well. And so maybe you would want to, like you mentioned, like a Tyler Booker, I think could make sense for them if they felt like it was a real upgrade. But really, I do look at that defensive line, specifically the edge rushers, but potentially even, some interior guys as well. And for the Detroit Lions, it lines up pretty well because this edge rush group and just defensive tackle group, I would say, is very deep. And I think that you could get one at the end of the first round, maybe somewhere in the second round, obviously, that you feel pretty good about. So I look at those 2 positions. I think they often focus trenches, but like you mentioned, what's Brad Holmes doing? He's always looking to just draft the player that he feels is best for the Detroit Lions. And a lot of times that comes from that best player available mentality. I think that they have done the work to set up the roster the way to where, hey, 28 rolls around. You don't just have to sit here and say, yeah, they got to take an edge rusher. Now, I think a lot of mock drafts, they do have edge rusher because of how deep the position is. And it feels like it's not just that they're forcing edge rusher. That also happens to be best player available approach for them. So it's lining up pretty well for them to be able to navigate that 28th pick pretty well.
Let's talk O-lineman first, because you brought that up. Is
Mm.
there a chance in your mind that Booker slides to 28, or is that going to have to be a trade up for Brad?
No, I do think that there is certainly a world where Tyler Booker falls to them at 28. No, I think the teams that are probably the biggest threat to taking Tyler Booker are the Houston Texans, maybe at number 25, although I think that they've made a lot of additions, so maybe they feel good about the bodies that they brought in there. Minnesota at 24, maybe the Baltimore Ravens as well. I think that he could fit right for them one spot in front of Detroit, but I think Tyler Booker's a really good player. I want to be first and foremost and say that. But
Okay.
I don't think he's like a Quentin Nelson level player. And I think that some people have Tyler Booker as, a top 20, top 15 overall player in this class. I don't think that highly of him. I think that certainly for Detroit, if you draft him at the back end of the first round, he fits the identity. He'd start right away. I think he'd be very solid and be a good starter for them for what they want to do up front. But, for these other teams that, for example, Cincinnati's picking at number 17. They need an interior offensive lineman. The Seattle Seahawks, number 18. They need an interior offensive lineman. Do they consider Tyler Booker? I think that's a little early for him, but the league seems to be a little bit higher on him. So I would answer your question and say, yes, there's a world where he certainly gets to number 28. And in fact, he does often get to 28 in a lot of the mock drafts that I do. But he is one of those players who, intangible wise, the way that they talk about him at Alabama, it feels as though maybe in a class of a lot of unsure picks, they feel as though he is more of a sure thing in what he could be for them.
Interesting. We have to bring that up because, like I said, I mean, Brad loves Bama players, and it's historical. So he's done that. Are you a Zabel fan then? Maybe more than Booker, and obviously there's that connection. His son, Hank Fraley's son, Lions O-line coach, played with Gray Zabel at NDSU. Is that another possibility at 28, or is that too high to take him?
No, I don't think it's too high at all. In fact, I've said this. We should be talking about Gray Zabel the same way that we talked about Graham Barton last year. And he goes number 26 overall to the Buccaneers. He starts immediately at center. They really like the player that he was in his rookie season, and they expect him to be one of the better setters in the NFL moving forward. So after I watched Zabel at the Senior Bowl and watched how well he was able to perform playing at left guard, right guard, and center while playing tackle the last 2 years in NDSU, it makes me feel good about his pro projection, who he is. And so I don't think it's too early at all. And in fact, those same teams, the Bengals at 17, the Seahawks at 18, the Minnesota Vikings at 24, the Houston Texans at 25. Like, I think all of those teams could be interested in Gray Zabel. So I think that they should absolutely be in the Zabel mix. I don't think that that's too high for him at all.
If that's a priority for the Lions, and they've said that they're not going to draft via for need at 28, but if Zabel and Booker are both gone, is there someone else that jumps up at you that could be that interior O-lineman for the Lions at 28?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Donovan Jackson could also make sense for them, the interior O-lineman from Ohio State. He played guard most of his career. He kicked out to left tackle when Josh Simmons, their left tackle, got hurt, and they sort of needed him to move out there. And so that's one that I think is within a lot of the realm of conversation. I will say that the sneaky one is Jared Wilson from Georgia. Really athletic kid. He's played center, but backed up Cedric Van Pran for a while when he was in there and sort of entrenched in that center spot at Georgia. He took over this past year at the center spot and had some of the best center tape that I watched of anybody. And I think about him as a potential top 50 pick. I think about the Seattle Seahawks, a team that's picking at 50 and 52 in the second round now that they have the Steelers first or second round pick. And I always have him going off the board there, but why not a little bit earlier, right? Again, I think that this guy is an elite athlete for an interior offensive lineman. And even though you'd likely have to, cross train him to a guard position instead of that center position because you have Ragnow there, you probably feel good about potentially doing that. And then however long Ragnow continues to play, you also have a guy that you can slide into center whenever Ragnow is done. So I would say that Donovan Jackson is the name that's often in that conversation that you could have there, but watch out for Jared Wilson as well. He feels like maybe that Brad Holmes type of a guy that nobody's really thinking about at 28, that he might be very willing to draft there if they like him a lot.
Trevor Sikma, PFF, does a fantastic job talking draft. I want to get into the edge rusher discussion, and now all of a sudden, wide receiver discussion for the Lions at 28, which might not likely shock a lot of Lions fans, but you never know. We'll do that with Trevor coming up next. And our program today is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire somebody, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and you get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. It's simple. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the purple hiring frame with the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Our buddy Trevor Sikma is with us from Pro Football Focus. I've seen him all over the place and doing great work, getting ready for the draft coming up. Trev, as you know, and you brought it up, I mean, edge rusher, the edge opposite of Aiden Hutchinson has been a hot topic here since last year. And Marcus Davenport is back. Josh Pascal's back. Onzrike kicks inside and outside, but a lot of edge opportunities, right, for the Lions at 28. Who do you see as a fit?
It really all depends, because I think there's going to be two different types of pass rushers that they could go with. And I think that the options will be there for both types. And I think the big question that you have to answer if you're the Detroit Lions is, what do we want our defensive line to look like next year? Because last season, a lot of how they went about defensive line play was based on Aiden Hutchinson getting one-on-one opportunities. They aligned the 3-technique defensive tackle, the nose tackle, and the opposite side edge rusher in a way where Aiden was going to be one-on-one with the tackle, whether he was hand in the dirt, head up, 5-technique alignment, or as like a wide 7 stand-up outside linebacker type of alignment. It was always built around the 2 interior guys being able to take 2 gaps at any time, and the edge rusher on the other side being able to handle the offensive tackle one-on-one. That would leave Aiden Hutchinson with that one-on-one opportunity, which is something that no offensive coordinator or offensive line wants to do. But how they aligned their defensive line made it impossible for them to allow that guard to come over and help. So instead, you had to always have the running back on that side of the line of scrimmage. You sometimes had to have tight ends attached to the line of scrimmage, but those guys aren't offensive linemen. Even the great tight end blocking players and pass blocking players and running backs who could block, those aren't offensive linemen. So it was always an advantage from the Lions. If they want something like that again this year, that's when you start thinking about, if a Shamar Stewart is on the board, if a Mykel Williams is on the board, if a Landon Jackson is on the board, you get strength and you get length to play on the other side. Now, are any of those 3 guys, are they proficient pass rushers? No. But they'd hold the line of scrimmage. They'd give you some pass rush work, but it would ultimately be a part of the plan that is simply allowing Aiden to get as many one-on-one opportunities as possible. Now, if they wanted the other side of things, if they wanted a prolific pass rusher on the other side to try to open up what Aiden Hutchinson was doing on his side and really just create pinch points on both sides of the line of scrimmage, then a Donovan Ezeraku, a James Pierce Jr., a Mike Green, a Nick Scorton, somebody like that, maybe a Princely Uman Mielen, right? Then all of a sudden, those guys become your priority potentially at number 28. So it's going to be fascinating to see what type of edge rusher they draft, because if they do at number 28 go with an edge rusher, I think it will signal one of 2 plans depending on how they want to build around Hutchinson.
Let's go back to Shamar, because the numbers in terms of the stats in college weren't great, but yet the body type, the fact he can kick inside a little bit and be outside, which is what Brad and the staff have liked, seems to be a fit for the Lions. Would he be there at 28?
Probably not. I mean, that's around where I have him on my big board, so I think that would be appropriate to pick him there. but the league just often drafts these guys who are super athletic and they have faith in their coaching staffs to develop them even further. When you look at Shamar Stewart, there's not a lot of guys that are built like him, when it comes to size, length, explosiveness, overall athletic ability, I guess I should just say. The ones that are normally go number one overall, right? It's Mario Williams, it's Jadeveon Clowney, it's Myles Garrett. I mean, those are the body type and explosiveness type comps for Shamar Stewart. But instead, we were talking about him as, okay, maybe a fringe top 10 pick, maybe something that's between, 10 and 20. The reason why is because a sack and a half in each of the last 3 seasons, respectively. Now, I will say this. His pass rush win percentage is at least a little bit better, and you have a little bit more faith in that. I think it was like 11.5 this past year. It was 15.8 the year before. So you feel a little bit better about that. But still, is Shamar ever really going to be this consistent double-digit sack guy that's going to be able to threaten that kind of a number every single year? I don't see him like that. And so I don't have him ranked like that appropriately on a big board. Now, again, for Detroit, if you draft him at 28, you don't really have to care too much about that. You feel good about just what he can do from the game overall. But these other teams, I hear about, okay, he could go to 6 to Carolina as their top edge rusher. He could go to the San Francisco 49ers, maybe the Chicago Bears, somebody like that. And I just go, all right, you're betting on something that we have not seen yet from him. And it does not get easier to see that when you make the jump from college to the pros. So I just think that that's something that you've got to keep in mind with him.
Are you ready to debunk these James Pierce is a bad teammate rumors? And if you go by some of this stuff, maybe the Lions just take Ezeraku instead because he just seems like a better citizen. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
I have Ezeraku ranked ahead of James Pierce Jr. simply because I have more faith in him to translate his game and his success to the NFL level. And I think he's a better run defender, honestly. I think he plays with more leverage consistently. I think he's more fundamentally sound. And I just love Donovan Ezeraku. So certainly if he gets to 28, home run pick for me. He is often the pick that I make for my Tampa Bay Buccaneers when I pick for them in mock drafts at number 19. So I think that he would also be great for the Detroit Lions. Look, the personality part of the process is often a mystery to us on this side of things. We are at the mercy of whispers and rumors. And, well, I've heard that they don't like this about him. I've heard that they don't like this about him. I've never interviewed him. I've never talked to James Pierce Jr. I've never talked to anyone at Tennessee's program specifically about him. So I can't speak to that. Instead, the only thing that I can speak to is somebody who's got rare explosiveness and first step ability from a pass rusher. I mean, you even saw that when he was at the combine, man. I mean, that 10-yard split is nuts. And even when they got on the field, those explosive drills, the way that he gets into his top speed so smooth yet explosively, it just doesn't come around very often. And so the whispers haven't turned into anything more than whispers about him being a bad teammate or something like that. A lot of people talk about the red flags. I certainly haven't heard anything concrete on that for him. And with that being the case, I'd still consider him back into the first, early part of the second.
Trevor Sikma with us from PFF. The Lions have openly said it, and they did so at the owners' meetings. They want to get younger at wide receiver. They like the depth that they have, certainly J-Mo, Amon-Ra, Khalif Raymond, Tim Patrick. But what about a fifth guy that could be maybe an eventual J-Mo replacement who may leave in free agency in 2 years because the Lions can't pay everybody? Does this surprise you to hear that Matthew Golden came to town to visit? Maybe Egbuka could be there at 28. The Lions took a receiver at 28. Would that stun you? And could you see something like that happen?
No, it wouldn't, honestly. And when I was starting to do the preliminary needs for the Lions, I remember looking at wide receiver and I go, okay, they're good here, obviously. Amon-Ra is great. Jameson Williams is developing into a nice receiver who's more than just a vertical threat. Like, I like Tim Patrick, so I like that he is on the roster. But do you feel like you could even get more elite in that area? Maybe they do. And I think doing your due diligence on the wide receiver position goes hand in hand with them committing to that best player available approach. So if a Luther Burden, if a Matthew Golden, an Emeka Egbuka falls to you at 28 and you say to yourself, man, we could live in 11 personnel and be about as unstoppable as you can be. How many corners in the NFL would have how many teams in the NFL would have the cornerback room to cover Luther Burden, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams on the field at the same time, especially with a speedy element like Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield as well? Not many, if any, in the NFL. And so that just goes to you sort of staying ahead of the curve, one step ahead, and investing in a position that gives you a good return on investment. Now, would it be as much as maybe another edge rusher? No. But long term, would it be what you want to be, to just continue to hit the gas pedal on scoring as many points as possible? Could very well be. Now, obviously, they're holding guys in. It doesn't mean they're going to take one at 28. Maybe they take one in the second or third round, something like that. But it doesn't shock me at all that they are, again, doing their due diligence and really looking into this wide receiver group.
More with Trevor coming up next. We promise some more quarterback talk. Want to get his thoughts on what may jump out as some surprises. We'll do that next right here on a Wednesday Locked On Lions. Locked On Lions for a Wednesday, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NBA playoffs now underway. We had 2 play-in games last night, another one tonight. Pistons and Knicks on Saturday. You want to get in on the action? You can with FanDuel, because they're giving new customers an incredible way to get all over it. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. You love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, right? Whether it's picking your favorite teams or diving into player props, after the game even tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Play all your favorite players. Doesn't have to be teams. They can be player props as you're watching all of the games. And again, we got play-in games tonight. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Do that today. At Trevor Sikma, at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter. I did see your video about Ezraku recently. I know you do love him. It was always good to watch Trevor just wherever he lands and is available on social media. He's always talking about all sorts of different things. All right, quarterback-wise, you mentioned before about maybe 2 in the first round. Mm-hmm. This Shedeur Sanders situation, I'm assuming he doesn't drop past 9. Why would the Saints not take him now with this Derek Carr news? But is there more to the story?
Yeah, it just depends on what the league thinks of Shedeur, right? And I think that we are at the point where, of course, we're just mocking quarterbacks somewhere in the first round where we have quarterback needy teams, because that's often how it goes. But it felt like that was the case again in 2022. And a lot of these teams held off on the quarterback position. And I think there were some other skilled position players that were maybe a little bit more tempting this year. But I'm not sure what to make of the Saints situation, because the Derek Carr shoulder news sort of came out of nowhere. And then there's some follow-up news that it's like, okay, well, the shoulder thing that he's dealing with was an extension of the AC joint injury that he had in 2023. He didn't miss any time from that injury in 2024. So it's like, are we just saying this because they want the public to be ready for them to draft Shedeur Sanders? I don't really know. This has sort of come out of nowhere in this situation. I think they need a long-term answer at quarterback, and it really just comes down to what do they believe of 2 players. One is, of course, Shedeur Sanders. If you believe that he is worthy of a top 10 overall pick, I think that they would make that selection. But then the other one is Spencer Rattler, right? Do you believe that Spencer Rattler could be somebody that could be serviceable for you next year if Derek Carr cannot go? If you think the long-term plan is to probably move on from Derek Carr next year anyways, if you don't love Shedeur Sanders, just start Spencer Rattler this year. And then next year, you're just resetting a lot. Now, I think that is the part of it that's most confusing. Is there have been probably 3 times over the last 3 years where I thought the New Orleans Saints should have just, okay, we're hitting the reset button, and they won't do it. So maybe they are just going to draft Shedeur at number 9. But how this Derek Carr news came about is what makes this a little bit confusing and tough to peg until opening night.
Our poor mutual friend Ross Jackson has to cover that team. It's not an easy task. You were at you were in Mobile. Mm-hmm. This Jalen Milro to the Steelers at 21. I just don't get it. I know Pittsburgh needs a quarterback, but are you a Milro fan? He can't even. From what I heard from Mobile, he couldn't complete a 10-yard out. So what's up with that?
So there was a point in time last season. It was really after that Georgia game and after the Vanderbilt game when I said, okay, you know what? In this class, give me Jalen Milro as QB1. Like, I get it. He is a work in progress. He is not exactly where he needs to be, but certainly after those 4 or 5 games to start the season for Alabama, he looked a lot better than what he did the year before. A lot of those inconsistencies were gone. The ball placement was much better. And then as the season went on, he regressed. And we saw a lot of those ball placement issues and a lot of the accuracy dipped. And he was starting to make more mistakes when he was reading the field and things like that. Now, the ceiling doesn't change with Jalen Milro. He has got a rocket of an arm. He's got a twitched up throwing motion, and he's a hell of an athlete that can basically outrun anybody on the field at any time, maybe even in the pros. And I think the intangible part is I have yet to hear anyone say a negative thing about Jalen Milro and who he is as a person. Work ethic, leadership, how he carries himself, which is very important when you're talking about somebody who could potentially be the face of a franchise. And so it means a lot. Now, there is, of course, the issue of consistency with him, which he is inconsistent. I know that people will look at the accuracy numbers and will say, hold on, wait a second here. Completion percentage, he's well within the realm of a really good quarterback here, but it's the ball placement stuff, not just the accuracy. It's the ball placement. You got to really watch the film to see a lot of that with them. I'm worried a little bit about the smaller hands because the faster and more twitched up your throwing motion is, the more you have to have control and grip of that football. And when you have smaller hands, which he does, I don't know how much better that's going to get once you get in the NFL, because the NFL ball is also very slightly bigger. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that throughout the NFL draft process. And so it's something to consider with Milro. I think 21 is too early for him. I would love to draft him somewhere on day 2, ideally on day 3, and let him be a developmental quarterback. But it doesn't feel like teams are going to get that luxury to draft him in the 3rd round.
Final thing, who's your guy? You mentioned Shuck, you mentioned Dart. Who's not an underrated name, but who's the guy that maybe goes day 2 or day 3 that ends up being really good, you think?
So for the quarterback position, I'll just stick with quarterbacks. I have Will Howard at QB4 in this class, and he is somebody who I didn't really love coming into this year. I thought he was really inconsistent when he was at Kansas State. Really good NFL size, good NFL arm. He's got some mobility to him, but I just did not think that he was an NFL quarterback. Up and down for him, I think, throughout the season with Ohio State. But man, that college football playoff run was really good, especially getting into the semifinal game against Texas and the national championship against Notre Dame. I mean, this is somebody who brings you a lot of tools that you love. I don't really worry about the arm strength from him either. If he can be a little bit more consistent, then I think that you may have a spot starter here, somebody that an NFL team can believe in, because he gives you the tools that you want from an NFL starter. So from this quarterback group, the way that I have it right now is I've got Cam Ward QB1, I got Shedeur QB2, I have Milro at QB3 sitting around pick number 100 or rank number 100 on my big board, and then I got Will Howard right after him at QB4.
I could totally see a Will Howard to Cleveland scenario, and then it's him, Pickett, and Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
That town will love that. I love talking about it, at least. Trev, great to see you, brother. Thanks so much for doing this. We'll check in with you after the draft. Love reading your stuff at PFF, and keep up the great work.
Appreciate it, Matt. Anytime.
Trevor Sikma with us from Pro Football Focus on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions. Folks, we are just 1 week away.